Okay, hi Abhishek. Thank you so much for jumping on today. I am so excited to have you here because we all know the amount of work you've put in and your story is going to go on the Hall of Fame of indie hackers. So I'm very excited to be sitting down and having this chat with you.
Thank you, Maitha. It's too kind of an intro, but I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So before we get into any of the detailed stuff or the serious stuff, how's your week been so far? I know it's just the
Dude,
start of it still.
yeah, it's been crazy. Actually, I'm recovering from the intensity of On Deck. I don't know if you've heard of it, On Deck Fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a 1 week mini accelerator meeting with a bunch of people. It's based in SF, so I was out there for about 10 days or so, and I got back yesterday. It's been awesome. It was a complete renewal of new perspectives. There's also, I read this article called Cities. It's by Paul Graham. He writes, it's an amazing essay, and I'm sure you've read it, but it was essentially talking about how cities kind of speak to you.
Hmm.
And San Fran is just wild. It's very much that kind of energy. It's like, it really pushed me to think bigger, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm being a very small fish here. I need to try to push myself. So I'm coming back with a lot of like rethinking and just trying to figure out how to map and what is 2025 gonna look like. There's a lot that I did in 2024, and personally, I'm like, I gotta one up that. I gotta push myself a little bit harder. So, yeah, it's been awesome. Met incredible people and really made my like imposter syndrome like peaked. I was like, man, I don't know shit.
I think all accelerators do that, and I feel like if they've done that, that means they've done a good job. Because I feel like we run on imposter syndrome. Like it fuels me every day. I'm like, I don't know when my act is gonna get caught, so let me like push harder and do more work, right? So
Yep.
I feel like I relate to you there. What was the most like? What is that one memory that's etched in you from that week?
It's a great question. There's a lot of things I was thinking about, but really I think it came down to how I'm looking at, or let me try to reframe this. I think it was mainly surrounding around like there's a lot of things we have to make decisions for day to day, right? And over the past few months, I've had many different challenges from like immigration to quitting my job and this and that. And I think just by human nature, this is me, and I'm sure there's a lot of people as well. I kind of go for the binary answer. I'm like, okay, here's A, here's B. These are the only two options I have. And kind of going through this last week, meeting people, I think a good example is probably like the whole question that keeps coming up on Twitter is like, do I raise funds? Do I go down the VC path or do I bootstrap?
Yeah,
Right?
the million
And
dollar question.
the million-dollar question, seemingly unanswered, and probably is going to be like that forever, but that question kept coming up so many times in the week by different people, and people asking me that question and people sharing their own intentions. I think the biggest thing that really kind of stayed with me is like on that example of, there's only two binary options. It's kind of a facade because there usually exists some middle ground there in between that scale that's more personal to you, right? Because one thing, and I got this checked, like somebody just reality checked me. They just asked me a bunch of why questions, and once they kind of got to that deep level, I was like, actually, I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
sure why I picked this specific answer. And I kind of repeated that to other people, and you can really see that a lot of the answers that come up is just because they saw something on the internet, or it's kind of the popular thing to do, the trend, and it's not really fine-tuned or optimized for your like personal where you are in life, what you need to do and things like that. I'm sure you've kind of gone through this too, but that was a big thing. It was really eye-opening because I thought I was the only one who was struggling very difficult, having a very tough time with that issue. But yeah, as I saw people asking and grilling others, it's like, okay, yeah, this is
This is a
interesting.
shared experience.
Yeah, exactly. There's a little bit of solidarity here.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally understand because when I was in that space of the accelerator program,
Hmm.
we had a lot of, entrepreneurs who've made it came in and speak to us and give workshops, and almost everyone was like, don't go down the VC route, or or they were like, just go the VC route. They were like black and white. But then as the program went on, there were more founders who went like, yeah, I didn't raise up until now, but now we're raising a huge fund, so I never thought I would, but here I am because the business demands it. And then you start realizing that it is a function of the business, but it's also a function of the founder, of like what they feel comfortable with and what are the lifestyle choices they want to make, because both of them have lifestyle choices or lifestyle consequences attached to that decision. So you really have to think about it. And then I realized, oh, VC funded sounds really cool. But I'm like, is that the route I wanted? I still don't know the answer to that question, but I realized that the reason I was going behind or going down the VC route was because of the clout, or the clout that is associated to that choice,
Yeah.
and it was not for personal reasons. So I totally relate to that. But that sounds like a very exciting week, but also very mentally taxing in a good way, because your brain is just like, my God, there's so much more, and there's like a whole host of possibilities that have opened up. Did you meet any people that were very like exciting and left an impression on you?
Yeah, yeah, that's where I was talking about my imposter syndrome peaking. There were some builders who I was like, man, these people are killers. I was like, I need to step it up. And like, some people I knew from Twitter as well, but they were just incredible. And it's kind of interesting. I was also kind of going in with this. I had kind of a few different things I wanted answered. One of them was like, okay, is there a potential for a co-founder here? Because that was part of the goal of the accelerator too, to, mash you guys up and see if anybody's really hitting it off. And I think with like the whole indie hacking thing, my brain was like, oh my gosh, solo and that's it. There's no like room for co-founders. It always seems like a horror story. It's like, oh my God, all these breakups happen, the company dies, and this and that. And again, I think that's kind of an example of the same thing I was referring to before. It's like the whole binary answer. It's like a very like knee-jerk reaction to say no or yes. And kind of came in there and saw all the like incredible builders that I kind of left with. Work with more people. Like, what is there to be worried about, right? There's At the end of the day, problems are fixable. You can talk through it. There's really nothing to be completely scared of, and kind of opening up yourself and your company, and also just being a bit more receptive to what people think. And that kind of ties into the whole ambition thing too, because it's really interesting. SF, it feels like everybody wants to try to start like something moonshot, which is awesome. It's really cool. But that's also like one thing I kind of noticed, and I'm just being no filter here, just brain dumping everything that I kind of recognized. One thing I noticed was a lot of people who are starting moonshots have no prior experience as well. Like they've never built a
Mm,
company, never built a small product, and it really makes you question. It's like, okay, is there founder market fit for this idea?
yes.
Are the odds of success higher, right? If you were a VC, that's like a alarm bell. It's like, nope, don't put your money there. This person is probably not going to make it. And then there's others, probably people like me, who are kind of thinking too small, especially with like my ideas. And I think we can, like, indie hacking as a whole can probably take a little bit of like inspiration from the VC backed
Mm.
founders, because I know we love to dog on those folks. it is really just kind of pushing the edge a little bit. I see a trend where, most indie hacking products are very like point solution, smaller, and kind of like solve one specific problem
Yes.
very well, right? Which is awesome. And that might be because of scope. Is like how much can one person really do? But I think one thing that I'm realizing is we can push a little harder to think a little bit bigger,
Hmm.
and to start to at least chip away at a larger compound problem, and kind of look at things more as a vertical and not like here's one feature I'm going to ship. Because the cool part about like the indie hacking community I've seen is like there's such an advantage of skill.
Yeah.
There still are people raising hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with just an idea, barely any
Hmm.
traction, and like very little experience, right? That is still happening, even though capital is very dried up right now. And that's kind of why I'm saying is like indie hackers have a significant advantage in that execution ability. It's like they know how to go to market, how to pitch stuff, how to get the customers, how to build, and not be worried about, oh my God, everything has to be perfect before I ship it, right? Which the VC backed companies can sometimes fall into unless they have prior experience. And that's kind of what I mean by it's like it's kind of healthy to push a little bit harder. I definitely left with that. I was like, I'm thinking way too small. I need
Yeah.
to push a
Yeah.
little harder. Where is the vision? What is the larger like angle, and where am I coming at? So yeah, this is an awesome week. I'm rambling, but I'm curious to hear
No,
what you
no.
think.
I think you nailed a few very solid points. One, you're absolutely right that the indie hacking space has a lot more to show for it
Mhm.
because they've made mistakes, they've failed more than some of the founders have even tried, right? So that's a good thing, that's a great thing. And they've been in the trenches, so they know what it feels like to actually ship a product and just hear crickets and go like, oh, okay, that's required. There's so
Yeah,
much
and
more.
still keep going after that, right?
Correct. And still show up and not lose hope, right? So that is great. And the other thing is they do go after the the slices rather than the entire pie, which is good in a way because they get so great at building that one thing that any VC backed product could probably not keep up with it unless they were to rip it off. But also, now you have a host of tools that you have to fix together because all of them do these individual things really well. And a lot of the B2B market or the larger ecosystem don't know about these tools because they're in this pond. They're not even going over to that pond to market and distribute and let people know. I think people are getting out of that now. They're, moving to Reddit and they're trying LinkedIn and spreading the word and doing all that, but it's slowly coming about. That is so so true. It
And
looks like,
to
go ahead.
add to that, Mother, sorry, you touched on a really important point. I want to double down on it. You mentioned, indie hackers are so good at like focusing on that one slice. I think that's exactly it. Typically, like you said, there's multiple products and there's multiple slices, but they don't relate in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like they're completely different verticals, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think that ambition and that edge really helps is like, okay, if we pick a slice, let's start to expand it within that same vertical. What else can we try to solve? Right? And that's kind of where I think people, so it's like you can really go from like indie hacker to founder. That's kind of that missing gap right there. And I do see this happening more and more now, but it's still very unpopular. But I also think it's like I really feel like that's the path people should go. And whether it be you're going to bootstrap your way to that direction or you're going to raise funds, doesn't matter. Just kind of like pick and then expand. The one thing that was coming to mind was just like a bottom up approach. It's very hard to go top down and be like, I'm going to completely revolutionize like the email vertical, right?
Yeah.
It's so difficult to do that, as opposed to saying, okay, this one thing really
Mhm.
sucks and there's nothing else out there that can help me with this problem. I'm going to try to fix that. And then I'm just going to keep my ears open to the customers. What else do they want? Is there
Yeah.
anything else I can help? And just keep doubling down on that. I'm kind of going through that transition myself. And yeah, it feels like it kind of goes back to my original point. It's like it seems like the more nuanced answer and the
Mhm.
more nuanced approach, and it feels like it's the right approach. We'll see.
Yeah, it's more the organic evolution of business rather. It's more about evolving than saying, "Oh, I'm going to start a revolution," right? No, you start with one and then you evolve and see what the users want. That seems like the way to go. That's so bang on because I'm now starting to think of all the people or all the products I see. They solve that problem, but there's so many attaching paper cut problems. They're
Yep.
not big
Yeah. Beautifully put. That's exactly it. Yep.
that can be solved and done so beautifully that I feel like you have that insight because you've been in this builder space for long, right? Like what, a year, more than a year?
Yeah, I think I just hit a year now.
Okay, so like, yeah, that's a prominent amount of time. And you also understand the builder mentality now that you are a builder yourself. What did you do before that? And also, I'm trying to see if that experience and your builder experience are like working together to give you
Mm,
that additional insight that other people are still gathering.
yeah, it's a great question. To answer your first one, before I actually ended up like coding, building stuff, and I think you might be right here. I was kind of really just trying to raise VC money for a failed product. It was called Home Pilot. The website's
Mm,
still up. I made it in Webflow. I didn't know how to code to save my life, so I just
yeah.
went to Webflow. I was like, I'm gonna watch a few tutorials, try to bang something up together, and ended up putting that out. And I was kind of going the opposite way. I was like, all right. I picked this vertical. It was essentially like a buy and sell marketplace. It was like, okay, imagine if Zillow actually completed that entire transaction like Amazon does. Why does it stop at I click Zillow, I find a house, but I still get only connected to a real estate agent? Because I was buying a house at that time with my fiance, and I was like, this is a crazy problem. I can't believe I spent $10,000 just to have someone sign a bunch of papers. It's the same rhetoric that's come up over and over, right? And I kind of went deep into that problem and was thinking, I was like, I'll try to get my real estate agent license and this and that
Mm,
just to try to learn things.
yeah.
But I think it's a problem that people have tried to crack multiple different times. I think there's headway being made now. But anyway, without getting lost in the sauce, I started there, and I started at a very top-down approach. I was
Mm,
like, market research first, pitch deck first. Let's look at all these little ideas and try to figure out where's the perfect angle. And by the time I was actually sending like the application, I had nothing. I just had like an idea and a Word document, and I was like, there is no way I'm gonna get funded for this, right? But I was like, I put it out there anyway, and I was like, I want to try and do something with it. And this was 2023, early to late 2023. Put it out there, applied to probably like 20 or 30 different VCs. Didn't get a single interview. Just
mm,
outright, thank you. Unfortunately, we decided to go a different direction. And it's funny because it was actually my current VC who invested later on. That was my first round with them too. They just outright rejected me, and no blame to them at all. It
mm.
was honestly fluff. Like they made the right call at that point.
If that makes sense. This reminds me of what I also used to do because here's the thing, when you read online, it's written by a bunch of marketers in that industry, so they seem to blow that, not I won't say out of proportion, but for example, one of the ideas that I wanted to work on was to help data centers not guzzle up as much water as they do because of the AI revolution. Because AI is, taking up so much water and clean water that areas around are experiencing drought. And I read about it and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the $1 billion problem because guess what? AI is on the uptick. I like read about it, made a presentation during the accelerator program, presented it, and the VCs are like, "Oh, that's awesome. Have you done a customer interview?" And I'm like, "No." And then I started reaching out to the people, and they're like, yeah, we know water is a problem, but it's a
It's just
CSR. And I was like, oh my God, this happens so many times. Like on when you read it online, you're like, oh my God, this is it, this is the problem. But it's not on the grassroots level. It's a systemic problem. It's not affecting one particular person that they're willing to part with their money for that. So when you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
we've all been through it.
Yeah, we've all been through it. But how did you come across the wait for me problem? Was it
Yeah,
your
it was
personal experience?
interesting. It was actually. So my first ever product, it was called Quill Cap. I launched it. I think I'm coming up about a year. December 1st would be a year. That was my first ever product hunt launch.
Very close.
It was, yeah, it was essentially like a GitHub style calendar, like with the green drafts. It was essentially just like that.
Mhm.
But what it does is links to your Google Docs. So you can essentially keep track of your writing, and it just does a word count. The reason I did that was I was coding, learning to code between like September to December, and my fiance would always come over and she's like, "Oh my God, that's so cool! Like, I love that you can see your progress." And I was like, "Yeah, it's actually really neat. I don't want to break the streak. I want to keep it going."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
she was
yeah.
like, "I'd love for something like that to be specific to writing, though." And I was like, "How hard could it be?" Tried to end up building it, and then I was like, "Oh my God, the APIs for Google Docs suck." And I was banging my head against the wall, but eventually launched that. But before I was launching it, I was trying to drum up interest, trying to get a wait list, and I was like, I was spending time building the wait list, and I was like, what am I doing here? I haven't even started with the actual product. This is insane. Just to try to capture email. And I don't know how long I spent, but it was too long. I know that for a fact. I was like, this is crazy. I wish there was just something more plug and play. The things that I tried out didn't really look good, didn't feel good. It didn't really capture anything. So I was like, I'll keep that as an idea to build later. And I put it in my little ideas notebook.
Notebook.
Yeah, for later. It's like save for later, bookmark it. But I ended up launching Quick App, and then mid-December announced. Wait for it. And after that, it was my first actual like real product. First one I ever made money for. I'll never forget my first customer. His name is James. If you're listening to this, James, thank you. He spent $12, I think. Yeah, he spent $12, changed my life. But that was really it to answer your question. It was like it was a pain that I felt, or some problem that I had, or an insight, and I just kind of try to solve for that. And I think it's honestly the right approach, especially because I think you're most motivated for those kind of problems. It's hard to, and it actually goes to another point. Is like everybody's worried about their idea being copied, right? And that never happens because of the fact that unless they came up with it themselves and they're like, oh my God, I'm passionate about this, people just think your idea is dumb until it
Yes.
makes like $1 billion.
Yeah. Yeah. And they'll be like, "Oh, I thought of this too. I didn't know this
Yeah.
had $1 billion potential."
Yep. Yeah, I should have made it Airbnb, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Or Uber or any of
Yep.
those billion-dollar companies. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. I like that it was driven from your own problem because the same problem can be looked at from different lenses. Right? And then you need to pick the one that makes most sense for you, and that's only possible when you have personally experienced it. I think that's also why VCs look for founder market fit. Because if they have it, they have no experience in that area, they won't be able to relate to the customers. And that's not just why building the product, but it's for the full life cycle, even marketing it to them, talking to users about it. It's very difficult. So I love that. And I love that you touched on when you were learning to code, right? Because I am a non-technical person. I have dabbled with no-code AI and all the other um, substitutes for actual coding, right? And my question to you is, having learned it and where AI is now, do you think they're real substitutes? Like, because I feel like I missed the boat when I could have learned coding. But also on the other hand, I'm like, AI is pretty good now with Cursor, with Bolt, and all of that. I know you felt like it was a cute hobby when it started off and you were missing the boat. Do you feel the same way now, knowing where things are with AI or even no
Mm,
code?
that's a great question. By that point, when I was actually starting off, there was ChatGPT, Claude was all a thing, and people were coming up with agents, and it was much the same hype as it is right now. Cursor wasn't a thing, but I don't think it's changed that much in the last year.
Mhm.
I think the UI and the user experience layer has changed quite a bit. However, fundamentally, they're still kind of the same. I can't, like, there isn't something so revolutionary where it's like, oh my God, I have some AI working in the background that's
Mm,
developing my code base, right? It's still a lot of user input. I think there's kind of two things here, but I think the main thing is it's a fantastic learning aid. And I think if you're trying to learn to code, you should almost significantly limit how much AI you use. It's funny. I actually have one of my best friends. He's going through this exact thing right now, and I, even having a year's worth of experience, really being in the trenches, fell victim to the same problem. He was over relying on AI to actually build out his entire project to a point where it got to it was impossible to figure out where the issue was. And it kind of goes back to it's a catch-22, but you can't fix it unless you know how to code. He was just in this recursive loop, being like, okay, it still doesn't work.
yeah.
Please help me. And it never ended up actually fixing itself where he had to go back and be like, I'm going to start from scratch. I had the same thing happen last week. I had a feature, or like about 2 weeks ago, I had a feature that I was coming out with for Lightscope, and I was over leveraging AI. I was using the Composer tool on Cursor, which essentially like makes a bunch of files for you, right? And just mashes it into your code base. Had this crazy bug come up in like this training flow that I had, and I could not figure it out for the life of me. And it was deep in somewhere in some different file. I just couldn't figure it out. And what ended up happening was I had to just basically scratch it. And I was like, all right, this time I'm going to build it. I'm just going to use it incrementally. Just finite positions, very small things and chunks of code that are very easy for you to debug.
Right.
That's where I'm gonna restrict it to. Again, it comes back to the same thing. It's like, do you use no AI? Do you use all AI? It's like use some AI, right in the
Yeah.
middle. Yeah. So I don't feel like anybody's gonna miss the boat if they don't learn to code. And I kind of go back to a very basic example. It's like if every conceivable job is going to get replaced by AI, there's at least one job that's left, and that's how do you build AI agents? How do you make them better? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's gotta be the final frontier. I can't think of anything else. If we have robots, Elon comes out with the like the dishwashing,
Optimus,
great,
yeah.
yeah, exactly, Optimus robot, and like it can do everything. There's still going to be people who are focused on engineering better agents and better AI, and I think it's still worth learning the code.
That's true. And I also feel like I love that you touched on it. AI has gotten good at generating, but not necessarily its diagnostic skills, especially when it comes to code, which is why you it can't tell you what's wrong. And then you have to be the detective and you have to figure out what's going on and everything of that sort. That's awesome. Okay, cool. I love how you touched on the first customer who supported you, James. Was that the moment where you felt, ah, I made it? Yeah, I know, love hearts. Or did it come in much later? Do you still feel like you've made it, or made it at level one and now you're in level two, level three? What's your status like, mental status like right now?
Man, that's a great question. I don't feel like I'm anywhere close, to be honest. I have a lot of imposter syndrome, I think, but I'm constantly very self-critical. And I'm like, I need to do
Hmm.
this better. I need to do that better. It could be pushing harder here or there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think it's really that was a turning point. There was a lot of things that happened in the last year that were very life-changing. Some good, some were terrible news, especially like immigration related. However, I'm glad those things happened because it kind of led me in a positive direction. I don't feel like I've made it by any like traditional sense, but I think I'm better off personally than I was a year ago, and that's really just the rubric that I'm just holding myself accountable by. It's like, am I gonna be better next year than I am now? Yes. How can I be better? What can I do that can get me closer in that direction? That's kind of all I'm focusing on.
Makes sense. And I love that it seems like your competition is yourself, your past self. And that's the only way to keep going forward without getting distracted. Because it's very easy to look at what the other person's doing and go like, oh my God, like, where am I in this entire thing? I love
Yeah,
that.
and my three, just to be clear, I still do that. I'm guilty of doing that every day. This is like a constant mantra I have to give to myself. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you gotta, live and let live. Don't hold
Yeah.
yourself comparable to other people. Just look at yourself. But I forget it every time.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I think it's like a constant reminder that we need to keep giving ourselves like, this is your lane. There's no one else in your lane. It's you're on that treadmill. Some days you
Yep.
feel great, some days you don't.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question. Every time I see your timeline update or a post, I feel, oh my God, he's done it again. This is awesome, right? And there's so many things to congratulate you for. Congratulations on wait for it getting acquired, and then also for the VC backing for is it for Lightscope? Am
Yeah,
I
not specifically for the company that owns Lightscope, but Lightscope's
got it?
kind of the predominant idea right now that I'm exploring. So
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that congratulations on getting engaged. It's beautiful, and these are all spotlight events, right? But what I want to ask you is, was there a time when there were less spotlight events to share and more struggles? And how did you get through that? Because I'm sure everybody has to get through their fair share of struggles before they can have something worthy of like sharing or even feeling proud of for themselves.
yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think 2023 entirely was that. I was
Mm,
not on Twitter. I was not doing any sort of build in public, right? And it was just a year of just. It was very dark. It was a very tough time to really figure out what I was gonna do. Because
mhm.
I had done some stuff in the past that was kind of hitting and things that got traction, but eventually kind of got killed off for their own reasons. And I was coming down from really like a multi-year low. I was like, what is going on? Who am I? What am I good at? And I couldn't really find an answer. And it was very tough. It was, and I remind myself of that period every single time whenever I'm like, oh man, this is not it for me. There's people that are better, who are well suited. There are people way more talented than me. I try to remind myself of that time because I couldn't point to a single thing that I was good at. And it was very, very difficult to wake up and keep going the next day. But and especially kind of double clicking, it was like getting punched over and over, especially
Mm.
when I was getting rejected too. There's also an added worry is my immigration, that my time in the US was running out as well. I had just signed on a house a couple months prior, and it was, well, actually, I'll never forget this day. It was April 20th, 2023.
Mhm.
Got an email from my previous employer who said, basically saying, oh, we got to stop your green card process because of things that happened within the company.
Yeah.
And my three, it was crazy. I had no other valid visa status and my time was running out. I think I had a year and a half left. And I was like, what do I do? And I remember reading that email and just walking across the campus, and I felt like I was just chewing glass because I was like, okay, I'm not good at anything. I don't have any like very hard skills. I'm not a great salesman or a business person by any means, right? And there was all these like, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. And eventually I was like, okay, well, I've said I'm bad at all these things. Let me just pick one and just try to do something with it, right? And that's kind of where the learning to code piece really helped because I was focused on making sure that GitHub was dark green and I didn't have time to really be like, oh my god, I'm bad at these things. I was just kind of psyching myself and just distracting myself. You know, I'm just going to focus on today. I'm not going to think about 5 years from now. I'm not going to think about 10 years from now. It's
Yeah.
just today. What am I going to get done now? And how can I feel like I've done a good job? And it seems like the recipe um, for the past year. I don't have a fancy to-do list. I have this book, and I just put stuff in and I check off stuff. Sometimes I don't get through all of them, but it makes me feel good, and that's really it. And yeah, for me, the short answer was I just distracted myself. I didn't give myself enough time to be depressed about things, even though I was heavily going through a very rough period of like the worst symptoms of imposter syndrome. But yeah, I mean, and I'm sure there are people kind of going through that too who may be listening as well. Just me too.
Forget about, forget about listeners. We're not forgetting about listeners, but I'm just saying, like, there's one right here. Your 2023 is my 2024. So, like, when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel. This is
No,
good, right?
you're killing it. You're absolutely killing it. Anybody who's on Twitter, I think, and pushing this hard, I always go through the timeline and I feel so happy because I'm like, oh my God, everybody's absolutely crushing it, you know, and it's so fun to see. I'm like,
Yeah.
these people are gonna be so successful, and I'm gonna be like, I know this person or I spoke to that person, and that's so awesome. But yeah, no, it's it's a journey. You kind of have to go through it one by one.
Yeah. And I think you touched on a very important point that not a lot of I haven't heard a lot is the added immigration troubles that you have to go through as a person who's just come into the country and trying to build their life. I have been in North America for almost a decade now, but when you were talking about immigration struggles, I remembered mine because there was a time when I was employed and I got promoted, and then I get to know from the immigration office that I'm not supposed to be promoted because my visa status was tied to it. So quote unquote, I had to get demoted so I could stay in the country. And it was absolutely devastating. It's just an added mental struggle that not a lot of people talk about or
Hmm.
not a lot of people feel comfortable sharing, but it's a very real part of your journey because now you're like, I've built all this. What if I kicked out tomorrow and I get to take nothing with me? Like, you know?
Yeah, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, but yeah, it's crazy the things immigrants have to go through to just have any sort of a fighting chance.
Yeah.
And whenever I say the things that I had to do to actually start a company on a visa and all the struggles that I had to go through there, it was like I always get laughs because they're like, "There's no way this is real." I'm like, "Yeah, this is like it's like a skit. I can't make this up.
Yeah.
The things you have to do,
Yeah.
but this is just what you have to do."
Yeah, yeah, you just gotta beat it, and there's no other way, or you'll get beaten. So there's, you either,
Yeah,
yeah, do or
and
die.
I know there's probably a bunch of people who are kind of I get this question on Twitter all the time. It's like, how did you start it on a visa and everything? I just want to put it out there and say, just please reach out to me. I'm happy to help you one on one, whether it's you're ideating or you're actually like about to incorporate. Because I didn't have anyone but lawyers to kind of help through it, and lawyers are a very finicky bunch because they're they're like go-to answer is just don't do it.
Yeah.
But there's very few who are like, there's a way, but you kind of have to like,
Mhm.
massage it. And I love those kind of people because So yeah, if you're getting discouraged and you're like, there's absolutely no way I can start something on a visa, I'm happy to help you through it. Just hit me up. Yeah, it's totally possible. Doesn't matter what status you're on. I'm seeing people do crazy things. So especially in light of like how worried people are with immigration, with the election and everything and the outcome of
Mm,
that, yeah,
yeah.
just hold on to hope. You'll be fine. One thing one mantra again, this is I kind of lied to myself, but it seems to work. I had to tell myself I was like to do those things. I almost feel like you have to be a little bit delusional because there's no way a logical, sane person would be like, yeah, let me bet everything on like a house and this and that on like a little small, GitHub contribution for Google Docs, right? Like it's crazy, but yeah, the main thing was like I psyched myself into saying I was like I'm gonna live my life like a citizen, and I'm just gonna do
Mm,
things, and whatever challenge that comes up, like immigration, I'll figure it out. It's okay.
deal with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
That's true.
yeah, it's kind of okay to lie to yourself a little bit.
That's true. I think the most cringiest, but the most true statement I've heard is Delulu is the only Sululu. I don't know if you've heard of it,
Yeah.
but it is. Right? Like you have to be delusional for it to work for you. If you don't
Yep.
believe in it, who else will, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I gotta put it up on my wall somewhere, but I have heard that before, and it's so true because it's like when you look at it objectively, starting a company is probably the dumbest thing you could do.
Yeah.
You make absolutely no money the first few months to years, right? It is incredibly risky.
Yes.
It just the odds are completely against you. You have every day you have panic attacks and like worries about, oh my God, my company might die, my livelihood might go up in the air. Right? And so people still do it. And that's I think just the best example you can put out for what you said is like you do have to be a bit crazy to do it because it is not for the faint-hearted.
No, it's not. It's only if you can be brave and brave, brave again,
Yep.
continuously.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Exactly.
that's the way to go. That's awesome. I know we're almost close to time. I have two quick questions. One, what is next for you? Given everything that's going on. And the last one, I'll save it once you've answered this question. But that's a quick one too.
Okay. I think biggest thing that's happening is I'm going to be launching Lightscope pretty soon. Likely going to be December.
Nice.
But yeah, that's the biggest thing. That's what's going on. I gotta putting out a big feature actually today. So we'll see how it goes.
That's awesome. Fun fact, when I came to Twitter and I found your first post, I was building with my then co-founders a competitor of Lightscope.
Oh, nice. I love
Yeah.
it. That's awesome.
Yeah. But it was, yeah. And I saw the post and I was like, oh my God, guys, this person built it. Look at that. And he, like, he just learned on his own. And there were two other people helping me on the team. So I would send them your updates and everything. And from there, I got turned into an absolute fan. So it's been an awesome journey, and
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to see what's next. And moving on to the last question, because it's the name of the show, what's the one blunder and one breakthrough that you've had over the past week? It doesn't have to be this week, it can also be past week.
Breakthrough was what I mentioned at the start. I think
Mm.
just to reiterate, if you have some if you have some tough decision to make and you feel like there's only binary choices, look a little bit more deeper. There's likely a very nuanced answer that's gonna solve all your problems.
Yeah.
The other thing, the break or blunder, there's too many, my three. I screw up every day. That's
That's
really it.
the whole spirit of the show.
Yeah, I love it. No, I think the biggest one was just having a lot of like internal fear about like letting people in on the idea, letting people work together and things of that nature. Is I was kind of restricting myself to just be solo, like I was mentioning, right? For no
Mm-hmm.
valid reason at all. It's just the panic stories and the sensationalism of like co-founder breakups and this and that. People are a lot more nicer. So it's like I was just like, dude, chill out. It's not gonna be that bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a learning curve though, like, because first you're very, very possessive about it, and you're like, what if I like really want to build and then it doesn't work out? It's almost like, you fall in love and then the other person goes like, nah, I'm not interested, and then they
yeah,
leave and you're left heartbroken. Totally understandable, but a very valid fear. So thank you for bringing that up. I
yeah.
think that's all. I mean, I still have many questions, but I will save that for our next conversation.
Sounds good. I love it.
Yeah,
Love talking to you. It was wonderful.
same here. This is a very exciting episode for me. Thank you so much for jumping on this call, and I cannot wait for everything that you have to bring to the Twitterverse and the universe in general. Like, very excited for Lightscope and anything that you build in the future. Honestly.
Thank you so much, Maitri. I appreciate the kind words.